The 5th of June. Hard to believe as time flies. It's amazing, isn't it? We have Ann Morrison and Professor McCanny here. Are you both here, by the way?
Yes, I'm here.
We haven't got Professor McCanny, but Ann, you've always got an amazing blog and information. And, of course, if they go to your Twiland blog, they're going to see some information, but you also have a subscription, so people can go to actually the web link we have on our associates page, subscribe and get some remarkable scientific information that tells them about what's going on in their world, and also what I call ties it into end times issues. Tell us a little about the blog today and what issues you're looking at.
Well, we've got some disturbing news. The anthrax that the military sent out from Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah apparently went to 18 states and 3 countries, and when they proved it, in other words, when the receiving laboratories did the receiving inspection, what they do is they put it on a medium so that it'll grow, and they use petri dishes for that. And 4 states found it. 3 states in the country of Canada found anthrax growing in their petri dishes.
Wow.
Now, what that does, what the Dugway laboratory had sent out was liquid. So airborne was not really a problem, they hoped. But when they grew it in the petri media, it turned the liquid into airborne form because it's the spores sprouted, so to speak, and
right.
It grew anthrax, which could become airborne. So this is not good. We don't want to be sending out anthrax in a liquid form to have the laboratories turning it into an airborne form. And there is nothing that says that these laboratories that receive this anthrax, this liquid anthrax, were even qualified to handle airborne form of anthrax. So it's possible that the anthrax scare in 2001, which was known as Amerithrax, it can be repeated this year. This is very serious.
No. People need to roll it back a bit. I met 6 months before 9/11, and the FBI and CDC director said they were going to do a war game with anthrax in the Northeast United States. That was 6 months before 9/11. It turned out that the versions of anthrax were not a homemade, weaponized version that somebody made in their back laboratory or garage. They were actually the Dugway Proving Ground U.S. military-grade anthrax that was released. So we know the government, again, was not only complicit in Oklahoma City in 9/11, they're also complicit in the release of these weaponized versions of anthrax. And I don't want to believe that this is just a level of stupidity. This is a level of complicit, false flag, flagrant violations of BSL-4 certification lab behavior. It's nasty. And it's extremely dangerous because anthrax, especially in a weaponized form, can kill people really quick. We did a war game simulation on 17th Avenue in Denver where we did a simulator with an air compressor on a second-floor window in the canyons of the downtown of Denver, Colorado, back in 1997 under Reserve Admiral Jews, the hazmat teams, including FBI and CDC. And when we did our war game simulation, we killed everybody. Nobody survived. Everybody that got exposed went too far along. If they had a weaponized version of anthrax, they would have all died. We couldn't have saved anyone. That's a war game simulation. Nobody actually physically died, but we worked through the logic of the spread and the number of minutes or hours necessary to kill people, and we managed to kill everyone. Not good.
No, and this anthrax that was in liquid form was sent to 52 laboratories in 18 states. And we don't have 52 biosafety level 4 laboratories in the United States. We have 4.
Right, so that means all the other ones are BSL-3 or pseudo-3, which means they're probably BSL-2 plus. Maybe they added a few little tweaks to it, which means they're not negative pressure installations. They don't have full-body suits on. They don't have total separation. And the dangerous contamination can get out. And these versions of anthrax, as they get out into the community, they can infect local cattle and other wild animals, and you can have a really big problem.
Yes, that's right. So, and this was from the military. So it's really bad. The Hajj is coming up. I want to talk a little bit about Ebola.
Right.
And The Hajj will be coming up in September, when Muslims go back to Saudi Arabia. And Nigeria has taken a proactive step, and that is that all pilgrims for the 2015 Hajj operations will undergo screening for Ebola virus disease, meningitis, and Lassa fever. In other words, before they ever leave the country, they're going to be screened. If they aren't healthy, they're not leaving the country. I think that...
Yeah, but that screening doesn't necessarily mean that they are not a carrier state. The carrier state is not as easy for them to determine that it's actually worked. You know, the screen identifies, number one, their carrier, and number two, that they actually have technology to prevent that carrier state from being a chronic carrier state. So some of these bugs that you get, they may be false negatives that they don't have the carrier state, and they may continue to carry it for some time afterward, like a typhoid Mary type situation.
Well, that's exactly right. But at least they're making some attempt to catch the people who are sick before they ever leave the airport, before they ever leave the country. And I think we need to do something similar here. I know it would be another medical screening that they would have to go through at the airport. But they're supposed to report if they're sick. And right now the airports, international airports, and 4 of them in the United States are doing temperature screening.
Yeah, that's not good enough. Temperature screening is useless. What they have is a DNA replicator technology, which I highlighted a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, that they have these kits for picking up Ebola or any virus, and they need to have a range of pathogens that they test in their bioweapon kits, and they can tell within a matter of less than 15 minutes if you have it, and the accuracy is mind-boggling because it's all DNA replicated based. So you can't do temperature screening. It's completely and utterly useless to screen people for temperature or symptoms. By the time somebody has symptoms, they're shedding so much virus, everyone in the area is contaminated. What you need to have is a pre-contamination level where the DNA is showing long before they're symptomatic and get them off immediately as soon as they do to a hazmat facility where they're in a BSL negative lab and they're in isolation so they don't contaminate anybody else. But
well, I agree with you, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It has to happen. That's the only thing that'll stop the spread of a super plague. And I predict that in the next, I'd say 2 years, just as a ballpark, we are going to have a super plague not only of animals. We have 40 million now chickens and turkeys dead in Minnesota and Iowa. The turkey capital of America is Minnesota. The chicken egg-laying capital is Iowa. 40 million dead animals already. And that's just the start of this disaster. And things like this anthrax, I mean, we're talking about if this got into the populations of cattle and sheep and other, ruminating beasts out there, we would have a catastrophe of global and national proportions. And if this gets endemic, because once anthrax, especially weaponized, gets into the soil and into the plants and into the area, you have to condemn the entire area because you can't have grazing animals on there forever. Anthrax spores will last centuries in the ground.
Well, that's absolutely right. And what the people in Texas, what the cattlemen in Texas do, they have what they call a Texas barbecue. And what they do is they dig a big hole in the ground, they put in at least 3 or 4 sacks of charcoal and set it on fire and underneath the dead animal, hoping to get rid of the anthrax, and then they bury it after it's well incinerated. And that needs to happen. The other thing that needs to happen is that those locations need to be flagged somehow with GPS so that people know not to run cattle over those areas.
Well, the problem is that the Bioport laboratory I'm very familiar with in the University of Michigan, in order to kill anthrax spores, just doing the Texas barbecue isn't enough because you have to cook them at 3 atmospheres pressure at 2,000 degrees to kill all 100% anthrax spores. 3 atmospheres to 5 atmospheres at 2,000 degrees. Anything less, you're still going to have some surviving spores, believe it or not.
Well, yeah, they want the spores to be inactivated, not necessarily surviving, but inactivated. They don't want to destroy them.
Come back, and we have Professor McCanney here, and let's continue to go through some of the news. And I want Professor McCanney to pop in. We're going to have him give a major presentation on his wing generator crowdfunding program and some of the other major issues. And there's some other top stories here, and I really strongly encourage people to subscribe to your blog, which is weekly, going to give them a lot of really solid science. And it's important to have the science behind the fact that we're believers and we're concerned about America and worldwide, And the regular media don't have properly qualified journalists that really know how to even discern this information, do they? Without the kind of hard work you do to post this and the work that I do and other experts like Professor McCanney, the regular media and the regular even tier 2 scientists out there in high school and universities, they haven't got a clue about what's really going on. They've not even the faintest idea how serious things are. So, and what other news items do you want to talk about? And then we're going to get Professor McCanney to give us a big spiel on the wing generator and his other issues.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, the MERS. And we've seen a big uptick in the number of cases in South Korea. It's considered a super spreading event. This is something that they never anticipated, never thought would happen. Most of the cases have been either had direct contact or been in touch with medical personnel that treated the index case, but a lot of there are people now who are tertiary cases, and they said for sure there'd never be any tertiary cases. So that means that they did not have contact with the index case or with the hospital that he was at or with any of the medical personnel. So they must have caught it some other way. The other thing that's happening is that people in hospitals, or people are coming into hospitals and being treated for asthma or pneumonia, they're being sent home, and within a week they're back in and they die, and they do some testing on them and they discover they died of MERS. So this is, they don't even recognize it when it's in there. If you're treating somebody for asthma, then you may not think that they've got MERS also. A lot of our students, medical students, I remember when I was in college and university, we were just taught single events. There was a causal event, and we had to track down the cause. But in real life, there's quite often several things going on at one time and interacting with each other, as I'm sure that you're aware of. So somebody could come in there with asthma and also then pick up MERS coronavirus and die of both of them. This is a big neglect on the part of the medical community. It needs to be fixed before MERS gets over to the United States.
Well, I think what they need is that, again, the DNA replication technology. I mentioned that they actually brought them over to Liberia, where they could actually identify within 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, by DNA replication technology, the presence of any bioweapon, including Ebola. And that needs to happen. We need to have every emergency department, every port of entry in the United States, whether it's a seaport or the transfer points coming in from countries that we call countries of interest, like West Africa. For example, here in California, Kaiser Permanente asks you, every time you contact a Kaiser individual coming into a clinic, whether you're for eye care, like I went and picked up my eyeglasses today, or anything, they ask you, have you been to West Africa or have you traveled anywhere near there? And that's good, but we need to be much more proactive in terms of DNA replication identification technology, and anything less than that is going to cause a catastrophe. Because once it gets into the population, the rate of spread of these, and we did a war game simulation on a supercomputer at NOAA as part of our Operation Top Off in Dark Winter, and we simulated a computer simulation of smallpox coming in from Cairo, Egypt to Oklahoma City, and we calculated that within 90 days, 93 million Americans would be sick and dying, and because of a very high case fatality rate, and it would spread to over 93 countries in 90 days. Yeah, so what people need to grasp is this is not something you can kind of take half measures. Half measures mean you've just kind of like pretended to do something that was basically not even going to slow down the rate of spread of the disease. If you don't do all the measures that I've mentioned here, you're dead. And when I talked to the FBI and CDC director several years later in March of 2001, before 9/11, I asked them a series of questions, and you know what Deagle's like for asking questions. I'm great in cross-examination, so the other side and attorneys, whenever I get in federal and state court, they would cringe and scream, "Oh my God, Deagle's coming." And I had asked them questions so fast and furious in court, in the docket, that their attorneys were cringing and saying, "Oh my God, I hope he doesn't come back. I hope he goes to the bathroom and disappears, or never gets off the ramp in the freeway, or you wouldn't believe all the things they try to do. Give me packets of money, give me death threats, do everything to try to make sure I never got to court." And no kidding, I'm not making it up.
Yeah, when they get up to 30 people in a chain, then that will become MERS will become an epidemic in South Korea.
Right. Now, why did it get to South Korea? I didn't know there were a lot of Muslims there. How did it get there? Was it somebody from South Korea that was a health professional that was traveling to the Middle East or something and picked it up in, say, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, or Yemen, or one of these other countries?
Yes, it was somebody from South Korea, and he was in the farm products business. In other words, he was selling products to farmers. But he didn't get around on the farm, and he didn't get around to any camels, and they looked exhaustively into his itinerary in the Middle East. He visited four countries. But there is no place where he was exposed, that they think he was exposed to MERS. Now, I'm beginning to wonder if Saudi Arabia is telling us the entire story.
Of course they're not. And if the Hajj happens, I predict that Saudi Arabia will be clamped down tighter than the drum. And, of course, it's right at the time when they're in an ongoing war with the Houthi rebels and with Iran. This is a very, very dangerous time because it's during times of war when proper chain of custody and control and everything is gone that this is when plagues start, super plagues.
Well, it's very likely. Anyway, you're going to see sound bites on the television with South Koreans, and they're wearing medical masks. The use of a medical mask is not considered to be effective because of the small size of this coronavirus.
Right.
So I have a suggestion for people. That is, use a static cleaning cloth, and such as those that are available for cleaning dust from device screens, and use that to cover your nose and mouth. And the way you do that is you fold it into a triangle and tie it low on your neck while the fold is high on your nose. Then you can slip it down and wear it as a fashion accessory until you need to cover your nose and mouth to catch small virus. To keep from looking like a bandit, lift the tip up and push it down beside your nostrils. Now,
well, we have N95 masks here, and we have tons of them available for people to buy.
They're not effective against the MERS coronavirus. The virus is too small.
For a NIOSH N95, actually the NIOSH N95 mask will get 95% of even smoke particles. So
smoke
I know
is
that
huge compared to a coronavirus.
The smoke particle is huge compared to well, it's my understanding that the only thing that's going to give you full protection, if you're looking for it, isn't going to be even these cleaning cloths. It's going to be basically a negative pressure suit we call Scott Air Pack and full body suit. But the NIOSH masks, they're going to provide a lot of protection. You can get a NIOSH N100 that will get 100% of smoke particles. The smoke particles are so tiny. Again, if you've got nose and face covered, you need a face shield too, because it's going to get in your eye. And we will be trying to get a hold of Professor McCanny, get him reconnected back up to talk about his wing project. And so we're looking at some of this news. It's pretty significant. Oops, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So it's pretty darn significant. Okay. Good. I'm looking at this issue of South Korean Air Force members confirmed with MERS in the U.S. Air Base.
That is very serious. Apparently, an officer at the Air Force Base that we share with South Korea, that we built for South Korea, and an officer has been confirmed to have MERS. Now, the military has isolated him and some 100 Korean soldiers that are stationed at the same air base. But they said that they either quarantined them at the military hospital or their homes. Well, the last thing you want to do is send them home because they don't know how it's spread, and they're likely to infect their families.
Why would they quarantine someone in their home and potentially infect their families that are not on lockdown?
Well, that's why
craziness.
I'm reporting on this, is because I'm hoping that people are reading these stories and saying, why are they doing that? I mean,
I saw the same thing in doctors and hospitals. Before I started my first day in medical school, I remember going down with my infectious disease bacteriology mentor, Dr. Robert Brown, and we went down to the hospital. This is 1973, before I went into medical school, and walked around the emergency department, the operating rooms, and various areas of the wards, and we actually did regular and blood agar plates, and then we played them all out, and we were testing to see which pathogens are present. And we have used everything, all the fancy metabolic tests and Bergey's manual for identifying it. And we found that every place was disgusting. Every place was catastrophic. Every place was a cesspool of pathogens. And if it was any deadly pathogens, like I found a few years later, or some years later when I was actually resident in family internal medicine at the Foothills Hospital, we had a pathogen get into our burn unit, and it subsequently killed all but 4 of the patients in the entire ward. And you have a Staph aureus that's pathogenic in there, they go into septicemic shock quicker than you can imagine. It's pretty nasty. And people don't take this seriously. And, of course, doctors are sloppy and lazy, and they really don't, most of them don't have a good background or the intellectual and emotional put together to be good scientists. It requires a specific character type, intellectual type, and skill sets to actually put them all together to make you a good scientist. And by and large, less than 5% of doctors would make any kind of good scientist. The rest of them are pretty useless.
Well, they're trained as specialists, and
it doesn't matter. Wouldn't matter how much you train them. These doctors will never be good scientists. It wouldn't matter if you train them for 1,000 years. Their character structure, their emotionality, their logic, etc., doesn't come up to snuff, ever. It wouldn't matter how much you train them. It wouldn't matter how many techniques you teach them or how many procedures you teach them. They're never going to be good scientists, period. Just the way it is. It's like some people will never be concert pianists or be able to sing a cappella songs, in a barbershop quartet. They're just, some people just ain't going to do it, ever. Interesting.
Anyway, this the U.S. Air Base there in South Korea has quarantined about 100 people, soldiers, Korean soldiers, and they say that no Americans are affected in the quarantine. But they're apparently this fellow, he had something wrong with his Achilles heel, and he went into a hospital. Well, he didn't realize it was a hospital that MERS was being treated at, because the South Korean government isn't saying what hospitals have MERS patients. And
well, they learned a lesson from America. As soon as they cleared it, the hospital financially went under. Or if it's a state-run hospital, a lot of the hospitals in South Korea are state-run, they get cleared out. And of course, it puts the staff are freaked out, because one thing about doctors and nurses, if you put them in danger, they're going to start kind of revolting, and they do it kind of quietly, because they know if they do kind of verbal revolting, they lose their job and their career gets trashed.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an anomaly. If I saw things going wrong in any hospital I ever worked, I screamed bloody murder. I didn't put up with it at all, ever. It wouldn't matter if it's the head of infectious disease, or when we had hazmat with, Savannah River nuclear plant, and we had radiation releases. If there was a radiation release and I knew about it, I was going to start screaming blue murder in the emergency department with everybody with their hazmat suits on. So
anyway, he went in and had his Achilles heel treated, and then he came back and he was diagnosed on Wednesday with MERS. So they got 164 soldiers and 6 civilians, all Korean, under quarantine, either in their barracks or at their home. And it's called OSAN Air Base, and it was built by the United States during the Korean War.
Now, the one thing about this whole, what I call mass quarantine, and I confronted the CDC director that actually was there at FEMA back years ago, and talking about how they mass quarantine, and they actually were going to sequester in Denver a local airport and put people on these giant, inside a hangar actually, put hundreds and hundreds of men on little cots. I'm saying all you have to do is put a fan on one side of this hangar and blow the pathogen across there, and everybody who potentially was not sick will get sick. This is the kind of stupid stuff that happened when the avian flu, the swine flu went through in 1918, is they'd have everybody in cots in an open air, kind of like prison hospital, and quarantining people, and it guaranteed cross-contamination. It was nuts. And this is, they'd literally run around from one bed in the hangar to another with an oxygen to try to kind of make them not turn blue. And once they turn pink enough, they'd run to the next person to try to make them turn pink. Without proper sterilizing the mask and the oxygen tank before they went to the next patient. So, of course, if they weren't contaminated, they were going to get an inoculum of swine virus to make sure that next visitation was they're going to knock on the door of heaven because they're dead.
Well, that's what's shown in that movie Contagion. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's very good about showing that when you put people who are suspected of having a disease and in with people who have it, and even if you move them from one end of the room to the other, they're all going to end up sick, and most of them are going to end up dead. There's just no way to maintain sanitation control.
Yeah. There really is no way of doing that. So I guess our predictions are coming true, though, aren't they? Please continue.
Yeah, there's just no way that you can. I can see why people are running away. You know, the people in Africa, if somebody gets Ebola, they run away from the authorities because they don't want to be put in a quarantine station. They know that the adults, anybody from 15 to 45, will probably die, and the young kids will be left. That they won't die; they'll just get sick, and then you've got orphans. So, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but I think you should stay home. Look around your home and determine which room could be used as a sick room, a room that you can shelter a sick person in place, and hang up paint cloths, the plastic, so that, and then fix the register so you have a negative pressure flow inside the room so that the air goes into the room but doesn't come out of it without going past for instance, a ultraviolet lamp of some kind. And I've got that in my home. And then just be very careful about putting on personal protective equipment, the gowns and the gloves and the masks and the face masks, face shields and everything. And remember that your hair is static. It's a good idea under these conditions to shave your head, men and women alike, because your hair is static, and it'll
come back. And I guess the powers that be want to make sure McCanny doesn't get back on to talk about the things he does. We'll pop him on another time. And sorry to disappoint you, powers that be. We will get him back on. We will have discussions of issues like near space objects and other things. In fact, I had a gentleman who was going to call in about that. John up in the northeast United States. And we've got a lot of issues here cooking. We're talking about the loss of the jet stream in the northern hemisphere. Of course, that means the plasma physics are gone, and it means the loop current is gone because of the Macondo drill site. I think it's about 5 years ago now, built drilling where they shouldn't have drilled in the pressure area. They were warned as early as 1952, 53 that they shouldn't drill there because of the gold theory that that's where the methane hydrates and that's where the oil is. It's not created by dinosaurs or by ferns. It's created deep in the bowels of the earth. And the increase in volcanism and earthquakes, and you have a map here, seismic activity is incredible. Right out of the Bible, Matthew 24, where we're seeing a massive increase in superquakes and volcanic activity all over the planet. I think we're going to have some big superquakes that are going to go around the Ring of Fire. And that movie, San Andreas, although some of the science is bad, like the idea that we're going to have a tsunami off the coast of California, off to Los Angeles, is just patently not true. But the amount of energy going to be released from a vertical 1 meter plus upthrust zone in South Los Angeles, those skyscrapers won't be up for 45 seconds. So anybody in there will be pancaked and squished to a bug. And if you're not out of these cities within 10 to 20 miles from the fault line zone when it shifts, you will be absolutely crushed by any of the debris in your home, flying debris. And anybody thinking that the power will be left on or the freeways or stores will be open, you're delusional. So I tell people right now, get out of the big cities like Los Angeles. Right now, have a primary place that's far enough away. If you live and work in one of these big cities, you can get out quickly. And be prepared for the fact that volcanism and earthquakes are going to happen all over the world. They're going to make nuclear reactors lose power and go critical. And many of them are built right on fault lines or near tsunami zones, like the Cumbre Viejo, Azores tsunami zone, where literally the chunk of the island can actually slide into the ocean, creating a wave that will travel at Mach 1 as high as 800 feet high, hitting the North American, British, and French coasts. So people need to be aware this is not theoretical. This is something that has a significant probability happening in the next 30 years or 10 years or 20 years. Who knows? But the fact that we have deep space objects that are causing gravitonic and geomagnetic effects on the planet at action at a distance, we're going to have a catastrophe very relatively soon.
Well, yes, and I want to remind people that the San Andreas Fault actually runs along the two tectonic plates. That's the Pacific Ocean tectonic plate and the North American tectonic plate. So it comes out at the Gulf of California, where Baja California is, and then it goes down. There's a big trench. There's a very deep trench that runs down along the west coast of Mexico and Central America. So should that, depending on which way it goes, now the Pacific Ocean is subducting, that is, it's going under, it's pushing under the North American plate. And in northwest U.S. and Canada, a separate plate is broken off called the Juan de Fuca plate. But in Southern California, that's not happened. And so we would expect that Arizona would probably go up and California would probably go down. And in addition to the earthquake, there might be substantial flooding in Southern California. So you want to get up high. You want to be living on a mountain, or at least you don't want to be at sea level.
My home is about around 7.5, 8 miles in, but around 1,200 feet up. So we're pretty good. We're on mountains, granite mountains, where there's no fault lines within about 40, 50 miles at least.
Yeah.
They're north of us and up toward Riverside County and up toward Palm Desert. Palm
Okay,
Springs.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about terrorism, because we all need to be prepared for that, too. There's Jade Helm 15 that's coming up. When is that? July, August, and September for 2 months. And starting in the middle of July.
And for those who haven't heard what Jade Helm means, is to summarize, and you can look at some of the YouTubes, it's basically to a joint operation to get rid of patriots, period. I mean, that's the summary. And they actually state right in their own documents that it's a simulation of how to get people like you, Ann, and me that might be armed or might have a bad attitude or belong to the constitutional republic and don't believe in tyranny or disarmed public. We, by that very fact, even if we're believers and we're good citizens and pay our taxes, we're considered enemy number one by the crazy maniac satanic globalists and their proxy in the White House.
Yeah, I talked to the people that man the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, here close to me, and they said if there's a roadblock set up, I wouldn't be able to get through it. Well, now I've worked over in the EOC. I said, well, I have a badge for the EOC. They said it doesn't matter. The only way you're going to get through it is if you are working in the EOC and they know that you're coming in to work.
EOC is what the fusion centers you're talking about, right?
No, I'm talking about the Emergency Operations Center.
Yeah, but that also is integrated with a lot of the fusion centers, too. So the Emergency Operations Center is working with fusion, which is federalized police and local authorities, including the sheriff, that they have these fusion centers for.
Oh, that's right. Well, this is the one for St. Louis County. Every county has one, and I don't know if that's true across the United States, but it's certainly true in Missouri.
Right.
Anyway, there is a backlash against Muslims, as you know, and the Supreme Court of the United States has decided that each employer will have to accommodate the religious practices of its employees without discriminating against hiring minorities. And the case involved a woman who wore a scarf to a job interview without stating it was part of her religious practice. And the Supreme Court said, well, yeah, the employer, having hired her, now has to accommodate her religious practice. So you have to think, well, how can I run a job interview without coming out and saying, "Are you a Muslim?" I mean, there's going to be some quick steps in here, because every employer is going to have to do that according to the Supreme Court of the United States. This is going to be a dangerous precedent, and there is a rising xenophobic right wing in Europe, and it's based on the intrusion of Islam into the historically Christian countries.
Well, I have Walid Shoebat's book, The Case for Islamophobia, is pretty solid. He was a Muslim Palestinian terrorist, and he married an American and became a Christian. And there really isn't any wavering on this. There's no such thing as mild, moderate, or extreme Islam. All Islam is bad. Just like all Talmudic Judaism is bad. All Satanism is bad. All high-level Masonry is bad. After you pass the 17th level of the rite, you're actually taught that the name of God is Yahbalan, Yahweh, Baal, and Osiris, which means they worship Satan. So anybody that tries to say that Islam is okay, and somebody's a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist or whatever, no. If you're silent over extreme Islam, and if you believe in the tenets of the Quran and you actually profess it in your mosque, you are a danger to the future of a republic or a constitutional democracy in any Western nation, period. There's just no wavering on that. And when people try to make excuses and say it's okay, I think we should be deporting all Muslims from the country, and we should be monitoring all mosques, and if they make any statements whatsoever, we should shut them down and grab the imams and put them into civil detention until we can get them deported out of the country. And people say, well, that's kind of extreme. I said, well, the people in Europe are finally getting to that point, but they've had so much secular humanism for so long now. It's in places like up in Norway and Sweden and Denmark where they finally reached the point where the percentage of the population, and it doesn't have to get very big, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%, and they're screaming for Sharia law. There are no-go zones in France right now that if you go there and you're a Frenchman, you're taking your life in your hands. You're really going to go into an area where you are not permitted by the Islamic so-called clerics and the people in the area. And this is over-the-top nuts. It's not normal. It's not acceptable. It's not okay.
Well, with every immigration event that's happened here in the United States, I'm thinking of the Irish that came in and
yeah, but they're all integrated. These are integrating populations. The Irish, the French, we all became Americans, no matter where we came from, Africa or anywhere. These Muslim people are not integrating. They are setting themselves up to be a supra-religion, a supra-political system, and they're like a cancer metastasizing into any Western nation. They're dangerous. And there's just no way of getting around that, is there?
No way to get around it. Well, dig fast, dig deep, Dr. Bill.
I appreciate it, Ann. You did a great job today. And then, again, visit Ann's Twiland blog and sign up. Get her blog. It's important information you get every week. And we will get Professor McCanney. We'll try to continue to chase him down and find out where he's at, but we have lots of hours to hear more from Professor McCanney. If not this afternoon, we'll have him another day next week. Take care, take action. We'll be back next week with more info and the best shows you can imagine.